The crimson sky above the Nevada desert burned with the aftermath of battle. Smoking debris from destroyed spacecraft littered the landscape like fallen stars, their alien metals still glowing hot against the twilight. Captain James Morrison, crouched behind a boulder, his rifle trained on the wreckage of what appeared to be an enemy fighter craft. The intergalactic war had finally reached Earth's doorstep. Steam hissed from the twisted hull as James approached cautiously. Intel suggested these Zarian warriors were ruthless, standing 7 feet tall with enhanced strength and combat reflexes that made them nearly unstoppable. He'd lost 3 good soldiers to just one of their scouts last month, a low groan echoed. From within the wreckage, James hesitated, finger hovering over the trigger. Protocol demanded he call for backup, secure the crash site, capture or eliminate any survivors. But something in that sound-pain vulnerability made him pause. He peered through a gash in the hull and froze, instead of the monstrous creature he'd expected. He saw her. Nyx lay pinned beneath a collapsed beam, her midnight blue skin glistening with sweat and something that looked like silver blood. Her warrior's armor was cracked and scorched, revealing glimpses of smooth, muscled flesh beneath. Most striking were her eyes' large, luminous amber orbs that held a fierce intelligence even as they clouded with pain. She spotted him immediately, her body tensing despite her injuries. When she spoke, her voice was melodic, yet commanding. The words in a language he'd never heard but somehow understood the meaning, a challenge, a demand that he end her suffering with honor rather than let her die slowly. James lowered his weapon. "Easy there," he said softly, raising his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." Nyx's eyes narrowed in confusion. She'd prepared herself for interrogation, torture, or a swift death. Not this gentle tone from a human soldier. She tried to push against the beam trapping her, but pain shot through her torso like liquid fire. A soft whimper escaped her lips before she could stop it. Without thinking, James holstered his rifle and moved closer. "Let me help you," he said, positioning himself at the beam. The metal was still hot, burning his palms as he lifted, but he gritted his teeth and heaved upward. Nyx stared at him in shock. Why would a human risk injury to help her? In her culture, enemies were either conquered or destroyed. There was no middle ground, no mercy. Yet here was this soldier, this human straining to free her despite the danger. As the beam lifted, she managed to drag herself clear, gasping as she collapsed against the hull. James immediately knelt beside her, his trained eye assessing her injuries. 3 deep gashes across her ribs, a probable concussion, and what looked like internal bleeding. Without medical attention, she wouldn't last the night. "My name is James," he said, slowly reaching for his field medical kit. "James Morrison." She watched him warily as he cleaned her wounds with gentle efficiency. His touch was careful, almost reverent, so different from the brutal efficiency she'd expected from a human warrior. When he pressed a bandage against the worst of her injuries, she hissed in pain, her hand instinctively gripping his wrist. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through both of them. James found himself mesmerized by the way her skin seemed to shimmer with an inner light, by the elegant strength in her grasp. Nyx was equally stunned by the warmth of his skin, the steady pulse she could feel beneath her fingertips. "Nyx," she whispered, the first word she'd spoken that he could understand. Her name, Nyx, he repeated, and the way he said it soft, respectful, made something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with her injuries. As the desert night deepened around them, James built a small shelter from the wreckage, using his body heat to keep her warm. For the first time in her life, Nyx experienced what it meant to be cared for rather than simply kept alive for strategic purposes. The sensation was as foreign as it was intoxicating. "Why?" she asked in halting English, her linguistic implant slowly adapting to his language. James looked down at her, this fierce warrior who seemed so vulnerable in his arms. Said simply, "You're hurt, and no one should die alone." In the quiet of the desert night, with only the stars as witnesses, something shifted between them, the first crack in the wall between 2 worlds at war. The underground medical facility hummed with sterile efficiency as Dr. Helena Voss worked over Nyx's unconscious form. James paced the observation room, his uniform still stained with silver blood. watching through reinforced glass as the doctor tended to wounds unlike anything in human medical texts. Her physiology is remarkable, Dr. Voss murmured, adjusting the bioscanner. Accelerated healing, redundant organ systems, and this silver substance. Isn't blood it's some kind of biometallic fluid that carries both nutrients and nanobots for cellular repair? James barely heard the medical jargon. His focus remained on Nix's face, peaceful in induced sleep, but still bearing the proud lines of a warrior. 3 days had passed since he'd brought her here, and he found himself visiting her bedside whenever his duties allowed. When she finally stirred, her amber eyes immediately locked onto his. The wariness was still there, but tempered now with recognition. She tried to sit up, wincing as her healing wounds protested. Slowly, James said, moving to her side. He offered her a cup of water, and after a moment's hesitation, she accepted. Their fingers brushed as she took the cup, sending that same electric sensation through both of them. "Where am I?" she asked, her English clearer now as her neural implants fully adapted. "Safe," James replied. "Hidden. Both our peoples are looking for you." Nick studied his face, searching for deception and finding none. In her world, such honesty between enemies was incomprehensible. "Why do you risk so much for me?" James sat on the edge of her bed, closer than protocol would allow. "Maybe because I see something in you that goes beyond this war, something worth saving." Over the following days, their conversations deepened. Nick spoke of Zirian's dying son, how her people's aggression stemmed from desperation, a need for new worlds before their own became uninhabitable. James shared his own losses, friends killed in battles that seemed increasingly meaningless. One evening, as Dr. Voss performed a particularly painful procedure to remove embedded shrapnel, Nix's stoic facade finally cracked. She gripped the bed rails, her body trembling with suppressed agony. Without hesitation, James took her hand in both of his. "Look at me," he whispered. "Just look at me." She fixed her gaze on his face, drawing strength from his steady presence. As the doctor worked, James began talking about earth-about sunsets over the ocean. The sound of rain on leaves, the way snow made everything quiet and clean. His voice painted pictures of a world worth protecting, a world she was beginning to understand rather than simply conquer. When the procedure ended, Nix didn't release his hand. On Zarian, she said softly, "Warriors are taught that pain is weakness, leaving the body. But with you here, the pain becomes bearable. How is this possible?" James lifted their joined hands, pressing her knuckles gently to his lips. The gesture was tender, almost reverent. "Maybe because you don't have to bear it alone anymore." The simple kiss sent heat spiraling through Nix's entire being. No one had ever shown her such gentle affection. In her culture, physical contact was either combat or reproduction, clinical, efficient, devoid of emotion. This was something entirely different, something that made her feel cherished rather than used. "James," she whispered, and hearing his name in her melodic voice made his heart race. "I'm here," he promised, settling into the chair beside her bed. "I'm not going anywhere." As she drifted toward sleep, Nix marveled at this human who stayed with her through the dark hours, talked away her nightmares with stories of his world. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to feel protected rather than simply defended, but in the shadows beyond the medical facility. Forces were gathering that would soon test the fragile bond growing between them. The alarm klaxons shattered the pre-dawn quiet with urgent pulsing wails. James bolted upright from his chair beside Nix's bed, instantly alert. Through the facility's communication system, General Marcus Stone's voice crackled with authority. "Personnel, 2 stations. We have multiple incoming signatures, both human and Zarian forces, converging on this location." Nix was already moving, her injuries forgotten in the face of danger. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, testing her strength. The biometallic fluid had done its work well. She was nearly healed. "They found us," she said, her warrior instincts taken over. "My sister Zara leads the Zarian rescue squad. She will not leave without me." James helped her to her feet, marveling at how gracefully she moved despite her recent trauma. "And General Stone wants you as a prisoner of war. We need to get you out of here." They moved through the facility's service corridors, James leading the way while Nix covered their rear with predatory alertness. The sound of landing craft echoed from above, both the thunderous roar of human dropships and the crystalline whine of Zarian vessels in a storage room deep underground. They paused to catch their breath. The space was cramped, forcing them close together. In the dim emergency lighting, Nix's skin seemed to glow with an inner luminescence that James found mesmerizing. "I cannot ask you to sacrifice more for me," she said, but her hand found his in the darkness.
"Right. Your people will name you traitor if they learn what you have done." James turned to face her fully, their bodies barely inches apart.
Maybe some...
"Things are worth being called a traitor for." The intensity in his voice made Nix's breath catch. She'd never seen such fierce devotion in anyone's eyes, especially not directed at her. In her world, loyalty was earned through strength and dominance. This was something deeper, something she was only beginning to understand. "James," she whispered, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was electric, desperate, filled with all the words they couldn't say. Nix had never experienced anything like the gentle pressure of his mouth, the way his hands cradled her face, as if she were something precious. Her own arms wound around his neck, pulling him closer, marveling at the warmth of his skin and the rapid beat of his heart against her chest. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I've never felt this before," Nix confessed, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "In my culture, we do not. This tenderness is unknown to us." "Then, let me show you," James murmured, pressing soft kisses along her neck. The sensation made her gasp, her body responding in ways she'd never imagined possible. "Let me show you how precious you are." Their moment was shattered by the sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor outside. James reluctantly pulled away, reaching for his sidearm. Through the door's small window, they could see human soldiers moving past, their movements systematic and thorough. "The storage bay," James whispered. "There's an old maintenance tunnel that leads to the surface. If we can reach it," the door burst open. General Stone stood framed in the entrance, flanked by 2 armed guards. His cold eyes took in the St. James's protective stance in front of Nix, their still-joined hands, the obvious intimacy between them. "Captain Morrison," Stone said, his voice like winter steel. "Step away from the enemy combatant." "She's not my enemy," James replied, not moving. "Not anymore." At the same moment, another figure appeared behind the general tall. Elegant, with the same amber eyes as Nix, but harder, more predatory. Zara wore the midnight blue armor of a Zarian elite guard, and her gaze fixed immediately on her sister. "Sister," Zara said in their musical language, "you live." "But why do you stand with this human?" Nix straightened to her full height, every inch the warrior despite her simple medical gown. "Because he showed me mercy when death would have been easier. Because he taught me that enemies can become." She glanced at James. Something more. The tension in the room was explosive. Weapons were drawn on both sides, humans and Zarians, facing off with the 2 lovers caught between them. Stone's finger tightened on his trigger as Zara's hand moved to her plasma blade. "Choose," Stone commanded. "Your duty to humanity, or this aberration? Choose." Zara echoed in Zarian. "Your blood, or this alien weakness?" James and Nix looked at each other, seeing their own determination reflected in the other's eyes. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The standoff stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. In the cramped storage room, 5 beings held the power to either end or escalate a war that had already claimed thousands of lives. General Stone's soldiers kept their weapons trained on. Nix Walzara's plasma blade hummed with deadly energy. "You have 30 seconds to decide, Captain," Stone said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Surrender the alien, and we'll overlook your temporary lapse in judgment." Zara stepped forward, her movements fluid and threatening. "Come, sister. These humans have poisoned your mind with their weakness. Return to the ship, and we will cleanse you of this contamination." Nix felt the familiar rage building in her. chest the warrior's fury that had carried her through countless battles. But now it was tempered by something else, something James had awakened in her. She looked at him, memorizing every detail of his face. "I choose him," she said clearly. "In both languages, I choose love over war." The room exploded into motion. Stone's fingers squeezed the trigger as Zara's blade swept toward James, but Nyx was faster than either human anticipated. She threw herself between them, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to disarm Stone while blocking Zara's strike with her. "Bare arm enough," she roared, her voice carrying an authority that made everyone freeze. "I am Nyx's third daughter of the Zarian War Council, and I claim the right of personal combat to determine my fate." Zara's eyes widened. The ancient law was rarely invoked, but it was sacred. "Sister, you cannot mean this. You are barely healed." "Am healed enough?" Nyx replied, moving to stand beside James. "And I fight not just for myself, but for the possibility of peace between our peoples." General Stone laughed bitterly. "Peace? These creatures want to take our world? Can be. Number peace with invaders." James stepped forward, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "What if they're not invaders? What if they're refugees?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. Nyx took a shaky breath and began to speak, her voice carrying the weight of her people's suffering. "Our son dies," she said simply. "Within 2 of your generations, Zarian will be a dead world. We did not come to conquer for glory. We came because we must find new homes, or watch our children suffocate in the cold of space." The revelation hit the humans like a physical blow. Stone's weapon wavered as the implications sank in. You're refugees?" "Desperate refugees," Zara added, her own weapon lowering slightly. "The War Council believed that showing strength was the only way humans would negotiate. We thought mercy would be seen as weakness." James moved closer to Nyx, taking her hand. "Despite the weapons still pointed at them, we thought you were monsters bent on destruction. Both our peoples were wrong." Before anyone could respond, a new alarm began blaring, different from the facility's systems, sharper and more urgent. Dr. Voss's voice crackled over the intercom. "Multiple unidentified vessels approaching. They're not human or Zarian, something else entirely." Through the facility's windows, they could see ships descending from the sky sleek. Crystalline vessels that gleamed with an otherworldly light. As they landed, figures emerged that made both humans and Zarians step back in alarm. The newcomers were tall and angular, with translucent skin that revealed the flow of energy beneath. Their movements were precise, almost mechanical, and when they spoke, their voices resonated with harmonic overtones. "We are the Confluence," their leader announced, the words somehow reaching everyone regardless of language barriers. "We have observed the conflict between your species. You fight over resources, while greater threats gather in the darkness beyond your stars." Commander Thane, the Zarian military leader who had accompanied Zara, stepped forward. "Who are you? To interfere in our affairs?" "We are the guardians of this galactic sector," the Confluence entity replied. "We bring warning. The Devourers approach. They consume entire star systems, leaving nothing but void. Your 2 species must unite, or perish separately." The storage room fell silent except for the hum of alien technology. Stone and Thane exchanged glances, the enmity between them suddenly seeming petty in the face of this new threat. James squeezed Nyx's hand, feeling the tremor of fear that ran through her. "How long do we have?" "Perhaps 1 of your years," the Confluence entity said. "But unity must begin now. Your species are more compatible than you know genetically, culturally, spiritually. Together, you might stand against the darkness." As if to prove the point, Nyx turned to James, pulling him into a fierce embrace. Their lips met with desperate passion, both knowing that whatever came next, they had found something worth fighting for. Her hands tangled in his hair as his arms encircled her waist, pulling her against him with a need that transcended the chaos around them. When they broke apart, their foreheads touching, Nyx whispered, "If the universe seeks to part us, then we will reshape the universe." Around them, the first tentative steps toward alliance began as former enemies realized they faced a common doom. 6 months later, the joint human-Zarian research station orbited Earth like a symbol of impossible hope. The massive structure, built with technology from both species and guided by confluence wisdom, represented the fastest construction project in either civilization's history. Necessity, it seemed, was indeed the mother of invention. In the station's command center, Nick stood before a holographic display showing the approaching Devourer fleet. The enemy ships moved like a plague across the star map, leaving empty space, where thriving systems once existed. But for the first time since the threat had been revealed, she felt something other than dread. "The combined fleet report's ready," James announced from his position at the tactical station. The integration of human and Zarian forces had been rocky at first, but shared purpose had overcome centuries of biological mistrust. 200 vessels, crews trained in joint operations. Ambassador Kira, the human diplomat who had negotiated. The initial peace accords, approached with a data pad. "The evacuation ships are prepared as well. If our defense fails, we can save approximately 60% of both populations." Nix nodded, but her attention was elsewhere. Today marked more than just the final preparations for humanity's greatest battle. It was her wedding day. Ceremony took place in the station's central garden, a miraculous space where earth roses grew alongside Zarian crystal flowers under an artificial sky that showed both species' homeworlds. Representatives from every ship in the fleet attended, their differences set aside in celebration of the union that had made their alliance possible. Dr. Voss, now head of the Joint Medical Corps, had designed Nix's gown, a flowing creation that incorporated both human silk and Zarian biofabric, shimmering with an inner light that complemented her luminous skin. James wore his dress uniform, but with modifications that honored Zarian traditions. Zara stood as Nix's honor guard, her former hostility replaced by grudging respect for the human who had captured her sister's heart. General Stone, surprisingly, served as James's best man, the gruff military leader having developed an unexpected appreciation for the couple who had potentially saved both their species. "We gather today," Ambassador Kira began, "not just to witness the union of two hearts, but to celebrate the bridge between two worlds. James Morrison and Nix of Zarian have shown us that love can transcend any barrier." The vows they exchanged were simple but profound. James promised to stand with Nix against any darkness, while she vowed to show him the wonders that awaited among the stars. When they kissed, sealing their bond, the assembled crowd erupted in cheers that mixed human voices with Zarian harmonic singing. But the celebration was brief. Even as they danced their first dance as husband and wife, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The Devourers had arrived ahead of schedule. Within hours, the newlyweds found themselves on the bridge of the flagship Harmony, watching as their combined fleet moved to intercept the enemy. The Devourer ships were massive, organic-looking things that seemed to absorb light itself. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," James spoke into the fleet-wide channel, his new rank reflecting the unprecedented cooperation between species. "Remember, we're not just fighting for our worlds, we're fighting for the right to choose our own destiny." "And remember," Nix added, her voice carrying to every Zarian warrior, "that today we stand not as conquerors or conquered, but as one people facing the void." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Human cunning combined with Zarian ferocity, while confluence technology amplified both species' strengths. Ships danced through space in perfect coordination, their crews working as seamlessly as if they had trained together for years instead of months. But it was love that proved to be the decisive factor. When the Devourer mothership broke through the fleet's lines, heading directly for Earth, James and Nix made a choice that would be remembered for generations. Together, they piloted a small fighter directly into the creature's maw, detonating a confluence quantum bomb that tore the mothership apart from within. The explosion should have killed them, but somehow, whether through alien technology, human ingenuity, or the power of their bond, they survived, floating in space until rescue ships found them. Years later, as they stood on the observation deck of New Harmony, the permanent space city that housed both species, they watched ships launching toward distant stars. The threat of the Devourers had united not just humans and Xerians, but dozens of other species across the galaxy.
Oh, yes?
Do you ever regret it? James asked, his arm around his wife's waist as she leaned against him. Their children, the first human Xerian. Hybrids played at their feet, living proof that love could indeed bridge any gap. Nyx turned to kiss him, her amber eyes bright with contentment. Never? You showed me that there are things worth more than dying with honor. There are things worth living for. Above them, the stars stretched into infinity, no longer a battlefield, but a garden of infinite possibilities. And somewhere among those distant lights, other species were learning what humans and Xerians had discovered, that the universe was vast enough for every dream, and love strong enough to make them all come true.